thank you everybody for joining us tonight. My name is Simon Echlep. I'm the Alumni and Stakeholder Relations Coordinator at the Faculty of ABP. And yes, thank you very much for joining us tonight for this webinar titled How to Transition into Your Career and Land That First Job. This is the fourth year that we are organizing this event for our students. And the idea is that we hear from graduates of this faculty how they manage to step from studying into paid work and start very successful careers. Finding that first job in your field, coming out of uni, that can feel like a really daunting challenge, particularly in times like these when we've obviously had a very significant economic disruption, both here in Australia and overseas. And obviously the university provides a lot of support to our students. And I hope you've been able to make the most of the university's Employability Week resources. Do make sure to check those out. What we're looking to do today is to get some really hands-on practical career advice, essentially, from three successful professionals who not that long ago were where you are today. We're fortunate today to be joined by Kim Lai, Director at We Are Humble, LESLIE CHEUNG, Director of Infrastructure at Donald Canwatts Cork, and David Hill, Director of Alternative Investments Australia at JLL. We'll start with the introductions from each of our panelists first, and then we'll open the floor for audience questions. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please pop them in the Q&A section of the Zoom window. We might not be able to answer every single question we receive, but we'll definitely make sure to answer as many as we can, of course. And with that, I think I might just hand over to our panelists. Kim, would you like to kick things off?
Sure. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen really quick. There we go. Got that. Great. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit of a brief story about who I am, what I do, what I have done, but looking through the lens of how to help you guys in thinking about how to get a job. A couple of key points to keep in mind, I think, as I sort of go through this journey, the first thing is to take every opportunity. You'll be faced with so many opportunities. You're not too good for any of them, and you can't predict what they're all going to be, and you don't know when the next one will be. So look at everything with an open mind and take every opportunity that you can. The next one is to always be working. Everything is an experience that you can grow from and benefit from. And so if you are able to, I would recommend always be working on the side. Take a part-time job for a day a week, half a day a week, whatever you can manage. It's something that will really help you, and it will make you more employable in the future as well. But never exploit yourself. Never. Don't work for free. You might think it's helping you get your foot in the door, but it just devalues you, and it actually contributes to devaluing like us as a profession. And then take the time to reflect back on what you have to offer. Look at what skills you have, and maybe you might be able to upskill in some areas, but at the same time also look at your skills objectively and say, actually, I've got heaps to offer. I can do a lot. So don't discount that as well. So a very brief introduction on me. I grew up in Melbourne. I studied here through school and uni, and then I worked here for about 5 years before going overseas. I was in New York for a few years, and then when I came back with my partner Tom, we started our own practice. So when you're talking about this idea of the journey of employability and when that starts, I think it starts now. It doesn't start day one after you graduate. It's really important that you use this opportunity while you're still studying, if you can, to try and also work on the side. It's a luxury that you sort of won't be afforded later in life. When you're at uni, it's this time when you can experiment and you can try. You're sort of given a pass. You're allowed to try 10 different types of firms to see what you like and see what the industry is actually like. Uni is great and it's a really fun time, but it's one piece of the puzzle. It's a stepping stone into the rest of your career. It creates this foundation for your professional education, but you will also learn heaps from actually working. It's just like any skill, really, where you learn through doing and practicing more so sometimes than from reading about it or talking about the thing that you're going to do. So I was quite lucky, and I was living at home with my mum when I was at uni. So I was able to work I guess, that luxury to work to understand the industry. I didn't have to work to keep a roof over my head or anything like that. And I understand that not everybody can do that, but if you can, it's something I really do encourage you doing. I had 2 jobs of note when I was studying. I worked for Peter Crone Architects for the entire time I was doing my degree, pretty much. And they're a small firm. There was 6 of us at maximum, and we worked on houses, some heritage stuff, and commercial projects. School projects. And it was this opportunity that I got that real quintessential small business practice experience, where you worked on everything at a really nice, slow pace. Everybody was super friendly. You were like a little family, and you could spend a week working on one detail and specifying every single color. And it was a really good learning experience and a really great introduction to how to do things properly in the industry. And then between my bachelor's and my master's, I decided to take a year off. And I know that it's not a requirement anymore, and it wasn't a requirement when I was studying, but it was something that I wanted to try. I wanted to sort of see what the rest of the industry was like. And I was lucky enough to get a position at Ellenberg Fraser in 2008. And I worked on this project. It's called Lily. It's an apartment building in South Yarra. And it was like the opposite experience, where it was great. Like, it wasn't an opposite in that way. It was the opposite experience in that it was super fast paced. So I got to work on this project from inception through to lodging the town planning application. And I was working with developers and all the consultant team. And it was a very commercial way of looking at architecture, which is completely different to heritage restorations. But that was something that I really enjoyed, and it was such an eye-opener, and it was something that I took with me as I went back to uni and finished my degree. So when I went back and did the rest of my masters, I actually also took on the property bachelor. I went back to working at Peter Crone. I was also very lucky to we renovated my mum's house at the same time, and I did that with Peter Crone, and we completed that in my final year of uni. So it was a very busy year, but it was a great experience, and I got to work on something from start to finish and see your drawings in real life, which is an amazing thing to do for the first time. And then upon graduating, I was offered a position back at Ellenberg Fraser, which I took, which was really, really great. So I sought out Callum from Ellenberg Fraser about 6 months into my final year. It was really important for me going into my final semester, that I knew what my next step would be. I just wanted to take that sort of stress and weight off my shoulders. And so I wanted to address that really early. And that was something I wanted to be very proactive about. And so I went in, and we had a good relationship from that year that I'd worked there before. And I went in and I asked, what do you think I should be doing? What do you think I'm well suited for? Which sort of firms do you think I should be applying for? And very generously and luckily, he said, I think you should come back. I think your skills are something that we could benefit from. So come back and work for us if that's what you'd like to do. And I did. So I then spent another 5 or so years there working on a range of projects that were all great, from the things that you would know them for, like their high-rise residential projects, through to some smaller projects that we did under the banner of the graduate program, which was a great experience. But so I was introduced to both Pete and Callum through my family. So Pete, his office is on the same street as my mum's pharmacy. So she's not in the industry. She just is literally on the same street as him. and he generously offered to take me in as a student just because he knew my mum and he knew me, and that was just a nice offer to do. And I ended up working there for, you know, like 7 years. And then Callum I'd met at an industry event with my dad. He's an engineer and he took me along to an event, and that's where I met Callum. And so both of those introductions afforded me the opportunity to have an interview, but then from the interview I was able to get those positions, and then you really have to stand on your own merits to keep a job. But so the lesson there, and the thing that I wanted to mention, was that you can't take any opportunities for granted, and you have to always be looking for these opportunities. I was a bit hesitant to take the help from my parents, because I thought that then I would have these positions and people would look at me like I just got given this job and I didn't deserve it. But you just have to forget about it and not care about what people think, and take whatever you can get wherever, because as I was saying, like once you actually get into a practice, you start from zero. Everybody starts from zero. It doesn't matter who you are. You have to prove that you're worthwhile being there. So I had 5 amazing years at Ellenberg Fraser, and then after that I left to go travel for a bit. So it's not strictly educational or part of my employment journey, but it sort of is, because it's something that I was sort of looking for that I hadn't gotten today. And it was like I wanted to create almost a design education curated for myself. I wanted to go and see all these buildings and figure out exactly what sort of a designer I wanted to be, and what I liked, and what sort of what environments felt like, instead of just seeing them in pictures. So we traveled around Europe. We drove clockwise around Spain, spent a few months in Amsterdam before settling in New York for a few years. And this is when I had my first experience of being in a place where I knew nobody. Your references mean nothing. Your reputation means nothing. You just have to start from scratch, and you put yourself on paper. You go to recruiters and you apply for jobs on message boards, and you just have to cross your fingers and sort of hope. And so I had 2 jobs when I was there. I worked at Avroco as a special projects manager, and at Hawken as their director of business development. They were 2 very different jobs. I only spent a few months at Avroco, but it was sort of an experience. They specialize in one-of-a-kind sort of hospitality venues, but they also own and manage them themselves. So working in the project management role, it was a little bit different, and I got to see everything from a different point of view and understand how all of these, the different sides of the business came together. And it's an experience that I reference weekly now in my business. And so it sort of just goes to show that sometimes you need to take the job, even though it wasn't the job that I was searching for. It wasn't the step up that I wanted when I left and found a new workplace. It was, it has impacted my life and my employment sort of journey so much. And sometimes you just need to sort of suck up your ego and take the job and see where it takes you. And then it was actually funny because it's a small world, and the director of business development at Hawken ended up moving over to Avroco in a different role, and then the Hawken team reached out to me to see if I wanted to come and take a director position there. So it all sort of links in, but I ended up at Hawken as their director of business development, and they work on big mixed-use projects. It's completely different style to anything that I'd worked in before. And it was a really steep learning curve where all of a sudden I had to be an expert in how they procured work for universities, or who all the developers were in all the different cities that we were interested in working. And it was something you had to really prove all the things that you'd written about yourself in your CV. And so that was really challenging. It was really fun. But one of the other things that I got to do a lot of when I was at Hawken was because there was 3 directors that would manage the company as well. So we did all of the HR. So I did a lot of interviewing for roles there. We interviewed graduates. We interviewed the middle positions and the senior positions. And one of the things that really stands out is that it sort of comes down to personality. Sometimes it comes down to the soft skills, not just the things that you can put on paper. So the things that you put on paper are what get you through the door. That's why we called you for an interview. We've seen your CV, we've seen your folio, and that's why you're here. But once you get in there, we're thinking to ourselves, can this person take instruction? Are they going to work well with the team leader that they're assigned to? Are they going to work well with the other graduates in the company? You know, is this somebody that I want to spend 8 hours a day with? So you can't underestimate how much of an impact that actually has. And then, so after returning to Melbourne, my partner and I started our own practice, and working for yourself sort of opens up a different level of interviewing for jobs. All of a sudden, then, instead of interviewing for employees, you're interviewing for jobs, and you're going to potential clients and saying, this is why you should hire me. And that is sort of, it comes down to the same point almost, where we've been really lucky to have a lot of repeat clients. And the reason that they say is because they say that they like working with us. We're a pleasure to work with. We work well with their branding team or their builder. We're adaptable, and where we want to listen to, like, we make them feel like they're a part of the process, and we are happy to change some things if it makes it like better or different. So it's sort of, it's about remembering who you are and what your experiences are and how you can contribute to a firm through who you are, not just through the specific skills that you have. And one of the things that is really important is to sort of learn how to express that and say, why are you interesting? What's interesting about you? And then just remember that some of the skills can come from anywhere. So if a firm specializes in apartment developments, or if they want to get into co-living or something like that, maybe you've lived in 10 different types of apartments. That's not something that everybody has done. And so maybe that is an experience that could add to why you might be more hireable than the next person. Or maybe we work on a lot of hospitality projects at the moment. Maybe you've worked as a bartender or a barista, and that's something that would be of interest to us, because then you understand the product that we're creating. So go into an interview and be able to have a conversation and talk about who you are, but learn how to have a good conversation, because that is honestly a skill that you will continue to develop for the rest of your life, and it will benefit you for the rest of your life as well. That's all.
Thank you so much, Kim. That was a wonderful presentation. We might move on to Leslie now.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Kim. That was very nice. I don't know how I'm going to top that. That was a very nice, interesting story. I've got one slide to share as well, and just let me do that. Okay. All right, so hopefully everyone can see my slide. I only got one slide today, and for people that don't know me, I'm Leslie Cheung, proud alumni of Melbourne University, proud alumni of our faculty at MSD and ABP. Not long too ago, I was there just like everyone else, looking for a job. I kind of remember that quite vividly. And I also always joke about it. I used to have a lot of hair back in university, and I lost my hair due to our construction industry. Believe it or not, it's been a stressful run, but it's good. It's good run. It's good fun run. And my story is quite interesting. And I'll probably tell a bit of a story about myself too, for everyone to appreciate, and might even be able to ask questions afterwards. For people who are studying construction, who wants to have a career in construction particularly. Interestingly, all my family, cousins, everyone, both mum and dad's side, are all in construction businesses, and my dad is the same. He's in construction as well. So it already was quite in my blood to be destined to be in this industry, and studied a master's in construction and continue on to be a professional in construction. But I started my degree doing a Bachelor of Science, actually, across the road, another faculty at the University of Melbourne, of course. I was one of those students who didn't know what they wanted to do at start until my family slowly winded me back into their own passions as well. And I studied a Bachelor of Science, and then slowly my father would take me onto construction sites, every, public, holidays, and, he'll show me around, summer holidays, winter holidays, he'll show me around on construction sites, and he'll introduce me to, developers and, aged care developments, commercial developments, and whatnot. And slowly he would very smartly actually, wind me in by getting me, this newfound passion by talking to these developers, and they all, very welcomingly welcome you to their hands and talk to us and how great our industry is and whatnot, which kind of, urged me to go off and study my master's in construction at MSD, and why not study at our great university. And I was already from University of Melbourne, so that allowed me to have a familiar foundation to go to, and it was really good fun. It was really good fun. But that was quite an interesting story, because I graduated in and around the GFC, right, 2008, around there. And that GFC, during that time, everyone would have known that both the property and construction industry really suffered. A lot of investors weren't able to access capital as well. And a lot of people who studied, whether it be architecture, property or construction, really struggled to find a job. So I can relate to that in a certain way, and give some advice hopefully today when we open the floor, because during COVID, I'm sure people would have found it quite difficult to find a job as well. And to give you a bit of background, currently right now, I'm the National Director of Infrastructure at Donald Camp Watts Corp, DWC. I got tapped on the shoulder not too long ago, 3 years ago, to start up this new division. This little startup in this existing 1966, one of the first few QS companies in Australia. And they never dabbled in infrastructure. So I was able to join this company and create something fantastic and build a team and build great opportunities for everyone. And everyone would know that currently right now, nationally, we're going through a major national investment into infrastructure across the nation, every single state, whether it be transportation, oil and gas, power, utilities, you name it, aviation. We have a massive pipeline amount of work that's coming through. It has been coming through for the last couple of years, and will be coming through for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So there's going to be a bright future. Don't let COVID, set you back. We are hiring, a lot of people are hiring. Our panelist, David Hill's hiring, apparently I heard right before we started. So, the future is bright, and it's about staying optimistic. And that's the key, that's my advice is, even when I was graduating from GFC, remain optimistic. Tomorrow is brighter. And if you put yourself, just like Kim was saying as well, with your necessary skill sets, your hard work, you'll be able to find a job. You might even be able to find your own company, like what Kim has done. So, from my perspective, I've been very lucky. I've had some great mentors, both from internally my family, but also externally from companies and external mentors. And a lot of my mentors happened to be, I was very lucky, they all fell within the infrastructure space. So actually, I was traditionally a built form guy. I did a lot of buildings when I first started in my career. And one of the first few projects that I was very lucky to work on was the Margaret Court Arena development. But during that time, no one actually wanted to put their hand up to work on high value, high risk projects and in the rail and civil infrastructure realm. And a lot of people wanted to do the sexy projects, the stadiums and buildings, but no one wanted to do the rail infrastructure. But look at it now, everyone wants to go into rail infrastructure and civil and aviation. And so my advice, is don't be shy and put your hand up and go into a variety of different industries. It doesn't have to be your traditional apartment projects that you've been trained in at university. Go into civil, go into rail, go into utilities. Utilities is the future. Alternative power, energy. There's opportunities for everyone to get your foot in the door, one way, form, another. And I've been able to accelerate my career quite fast and well, not only from great mentorship, but these exact opportunities. Victoria, I'm the cost advisor to the Across Yarra Partnership. Len Bui and John Holmes, who's delivering the Melbourne Metro Tunnel project. So I'm part of the consortium that's managing the budgets for the $11 billion project development. And funnily, I always joke about it. I was actually working on the state side as well with Quenta, who developed the budget for this Metro Tunnel project. And that's where I lost all my hair. But that's okay. It's all good fun. And it's actually quite funny because every time I try to leave that project, they always try to, wind me back in. But going from there, there's all these other projects that I was able to have the opportunity to be part of, including all the level crossing projects. And currently right now, I'm looking after with the consortium with John Hans on the Northwest Program Alliance, Bell to Preston, Glen Roy level crossing, Bell to Moreland. Those are very cool, awesome projects to be part of. And currently right now, I'm also giving cost advice to the state side. So we're the state side cost advisors to Geelong line upgrade, South Geelong to Warren Ponds, the duplication project, and really contributing to the communities. And these kind of projects doesn't come at a snapshot. There's opportunities to work on these doesn't come snapshot. But the message that I want to say to everyone is, if you do really put your hand up and say, you know what, I'm willing to give it a crack, and people recognize that and your ability to really get dirty and get down and help and try your luck, you'll be able to get in the door and get experience. Also, I'm not sure if I mentioned, I'm also part of the Construction Advisory Board at the University of Melbourne. I sit on the board with Valerie and everyone at ABP. And one of the few common topics that we discuss about is employability and grads. And I think I can tell and vie for everyone, because I'm right in the mix right now in this world. Recent alumni, if you're a student, be optimistic. There's going to be a lot of opportunities. I've just hired 2 grads started this year who just had the opportunity to present on a project with me and working closely with me, being mentored by me on the Melbourne Underground rail loop, existing city loop that needs to be upgraded, Geelong line upgrade, and much more. More last year during COVID, I was able to hire another Melbourne graduate who was able to work with me on the Antarctic division of aviation facilities renewal project. And that's been very interesting, all the logistics, all the opportunities to, prefab, you look into prefab, modular construction, how we're going to ship the materials down into Antarctic. So I'm looking forward to talking to everyone, and feel free to be open and ask questions, and hopefully I could pass some advice.
Thank you, thank you, Leslie. Thanks so much for that. And there was really good insight into the construction industry, and particularly speaking from hearing about your experience around the GFC. There's certainly parallels, I guess, to what's happening at the moment or has happened last year. I might hand over to David then to speak on his career.
Excellent. Thanks, Simon, and thanks to Kim and Leslie for some excellent insights there. And actually, I guess the benefit of always going last is seeing some of the similarities, I think, between our experience. So firstly, I know Kim touched on sort of taking a job that's not always necessarily the job you want, but learning from it. And Leslie talking about sort of new sectors, creating new opportunities, which hits what I do on the head. So you might be looking at my title as Director of Alternative Investments at JLL and scratching your head as to what exactly that means. Essentially, we cover any of the non-core real estate classes, which essentially includes everything from sort of seniors living, healthcare, childcare, data centres, self-storage. What have I left out? Well, essentially what I cover. So I look after living sectors for Australia and New Zealand in the capital market space. So transactions across student accommodation, co-living and build to rent. So I'm coming up to my 10-year anniversary at JLL, which is just around the corner. It's gone very quickly, and I'll sort of step you through some of my experience as well and the similarities. So I guess where it all started in 2007, I moved to Melbourne from Geelong to study a Bachelor of Commerce, majoring in finance and economics at the University of Melbourne, and was fortunate enough to live on campus at Queen's College at uni. Talking about first jobs, I think my first job, touching on some of the other feedback as well, was starting at the bottom. So I scrubbed dishes for the 180 odd students at Queen's College 3 days a week, which I think, as you'll see, sort of the theme of what I touch on here is you're never too good for a job. You got to keep it real and learn from every experience that every job gives you and build on it as a foundation. So after completing my Bachelor of Commerce, I landed my dream job in stockbroking, which is what I wanted to do during school. I got there and quickly realised that it wasn't everything that I wanted to do. It was a very specialised role in international equities. I lasted 6 months. We were essentially told to make a minimum of 70 phone calls a day to clients and prospective clients, and report back at the end of the day how many clients we'd managed to book in for meetings, book in for seminars, or managed to pass on to our trading desk to make trades. So it was a pretty grueling job for 6 months at making 70 plus calls a day. But as you can probably see where I'm heading, I've now ended up in a sales role essentially, and having that ability to sort of just build on that sales technique just through ruthless training has sort of got me one step closer to where I am now. So after 6 months sort of in that job, realised it wasn't what I wanted to be doing. I actually went back to Melbourne University and enrolled in a graduate diploma of property valuation initially. 6 months into that, I started speaking to JLL. So a former college friend of mine had been working there for 3 or 4 years, and similar themed in terms of networking, which I'll touch on in a moment. But getting to know people in roles, keeping close to them, and just on the radar. These things don't happen overnight. It took 6 months between this initial conversation and the point at which I was called into an interview, essentially, when a role came up in the valuations and advisory team here at JLL. So 6 months later, managed to sort of land myself the interview and walked in and subsequently got the job at the point I was studying, and went on to finish doing my master's in property as well at the University of Melbourne. So ended up working 4 to 5 days a week and doing 4 to 5 subjects. So full-time loads, which didn't leave much time for fun for a couple of years, but I got there in the end, which was good. And so I spent 5 years in valuations advisory here at JLL, and that's sort of building on the commerce skill set, playing to my strengths in a way, being very numbers focused, and being exposed to some excellent opportunities. So for 2 years, I was part of the team advising Department of Treasury and Finance and the privatisation of the Port of Melbourne, which was a $9.8 billion sale. So quite a significant project to be involved in, particularly in my early years in the industry, essentially. So then, I guess, touching on sort of what I wouldn't call a false start, because I'm sort of saying that, you know, all experience is good experience, and focus on what you learn from these roles, even if they aren't your dream job. And as Kim sort of alluded to, you know, acknowledging what you're getting from the job, where you can learn, and when you find yourself that you're not really progressing any further, or it's not the environment you want to be in, acknowledge the experience and look for the next step. So don't ever think that an experience or a job is a wasted opportunity. It's all sort of building over time. The other thing as well, sort of on that note, I think there's a bit of a trend, or increasingly so, people sort of feeling an ability to sort of jump between jobs to try and progress in the industry, and not really seeing roles out. My advice is stay in a role until you don't feel yourself learning any further. It's critical to sort of give a job a chance to get everything you can out of it. And at the point that you don't, you stop learning, or you're not seeing any further opportunity, then start looking. Don't use sort of jumping between jobs as a ladder, because as I sort of said, I'm coming up 10 years now at JLL, and my opportunity is being created by persistence in a role and creating new opportunity as I've understood sort of my role, the growth opportunities for the business, and new sectors emerging. So then I guess I moved into alternative investments 5 years ago, sort of looking, moving away from the valuations, but using that skill set I've developed in valuations, applying it to transactions or sales, essentially. So in my role now, sort of leading the sales for living sectors. We've done $1.5 billion of sales in the last 2 years, and advised on another $3.5 billion of living sectors. So mostly student accommodation in that space. We sold Atira Student Living, which they have a couple of assets around Melbourne University. Journal Student Living have a couple of assets around Melbourne University, and advised Scape on the acquisition of Urbanist, which is another big student accommodation provider. So starting to sort of see that volume in the market, and it was very much in its infancy when I joined the team. But as Leslie said, I sort of saw the opportunity in the space, and found an opportunity to become an expert, which essentially helped my acceleration through my career, by acknowledging where this opportunity is and really working hard to position myself as an expert, and learning off, not just people in Melbourne or Victoria or Australia, but sort of learning off globally, where other parts of the world do things better than we do, how you can sort of learn from how that's being done, and use that to progress both yourself and your role and the company that you work for. I guess sort of touching on opportunities in a post-COVID world as we're recovering. Obviously, it's a tougher job market at the moment, but I think sort of a success story we had, as Leslie said as well, we hired a recent graduate from Melbourne University in January this year. So Jimmy Chen, who's from China, spent 5 years at Melbourne University studying, just reached out on LinkedIn to me one day. It might have been after I spoke at a property event or something, but just took the initiative just to say, hey, I'm Jimmy, I'm at Melbourne University, really interested to hear what you do, and got the conversation going. It took 12 months. He was persistent. He wasn't harassing, but persistent. And it was just sort of touch points over every few months, just saying, understand you don't have any roles going, just want to be on the radar, anything interesting you're working on, that sort of thing, that just really started developing that relationship, which resulted in ultimately me picking up the phone to him in December last year and saying, we've just created a role and we want to speak to you. And he started in January. So good news story there. And particularly, I think, reflective as well of finding opportunities again in markets that are performing, create obviously growth, which creates more roles. So just be aware of sort of what's happening. And as Leslie said, sort of infrastructure has just blown up and the job creation's huge. So be aware of these bigger themes and where those opportunities might take you. Importance of networking, obviously, is how I got my job at JLL. It wasn't the be all and end all, as Kim said. It's also about, it opens a door, but it's up to you to be able to prove yourself. And I can tell you that the workplace, it doesn't reward people that come in and get handed something and don't deliver. It's honest, and it's reflective of hard work. And the reality is there's no shortcuts. It's just got to come down to hard work. So make sure you're aware of that. Don't feel like just because you've got a university degree, it's good enough and you can walk into a role and nail it. The reality is the university degree is the beginning. We're still learning. I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly studying, upskilling, and that's probably a key theme as well. You never stop learning. The courses, I'm doing courses after hours at the moment, just on things, just to develop that skill set. So it's just the beginning. Don't feel like you know everything. You don't. I don't. It's just continual. And I think my last point, sort of just making sure for your own individual growth, is surrounding yourself with diverse people. So different skill sets, ages, culture, gender, places of birth, anything that brings a different perspective to your own is critical to, success, simply put. The best teams are those that work closely together and value input from every angle. So that's probably my closing point there.
Thanks so much, David. There was another round of amazing insights, and it's really great to hear how obviously we have not coordinated these presentations in advance, but there are all these topics that keep emerging throughout all of them. I think show how there are really key strains and things to keep in mind as you prepare to enter the job market. And please do put your questions in the Q&A so I can put them to the panelists. It's just the Q&A window, on the Q&A button on the bottom of the Zoom window. So do send those questions in. In the meantime, I might just pick up on a point that David had just spoken about, networking. And I recall, I think I graduated about 10 years ago, and I went to a lot of the things at Uni Melbourne organizers for students as they go into the job market. And there was a lot of talk about the hidden job market and the importance of networking. And I remember for myself, particularly if you're an overseas student, hearing about the hidden job market and how you have to network, it all sounded quite scary, because it was like, you don't have those networks necessarily. How do you start building those up? And David, you already pointed out one way is to reach out on LinkedIn these days and do it in a way that's polite, obviously, and not harassing people, but also find the right, persistence and to keep going. And maybe, Leslie, Kim, maybe you can speak on that point as well. How do you think students these days can start networking while they study? And of course, David, also please feel free to elaborate further on how you think students can do that best and finding that right sort of tone between being persistent, but also obviously not asking for jobs outright.
Okay. From my point of view, I think when I got to New York, for example, I didn't know anybody in the industry at all. And one of the things that I tried to do was go to other industry events. So there are other groups like in America, ULI is a much bigger force, or has a bigger presence than it does here. But so there's also like the Property Council here. So going to different events put on by them and just trying to meet people and talk to people about what their jobs are and what they do, and start even just casual mentoring relationships. I met with lots of people through going to events like that I would then continue to have to catch up with them and chat to them about different things, even just learning about how different offices work. And then that might help you understand where there might be roles in different offices. But also even just networking with other students, because sometimes if another student gets a position, the firm might say to them, do you know anybody that is good we need someone for this other team? Do you know anybody? And sometimes that's the first step. So anything can be of value. I mean, I played archi soccer for a long time, and that's how I met lots of other architects. That's also something you can do. There's lots of group activities that you sort of have to open yourself up to.
I might go second. I think that's a very good question, Simon, in regard to networking. And one of the few things that doesn't get stressed enough is, if whether you're international or local student, really put yourself out there and network. And I think one misconstrued part of networking, a lot of people think is, I've got to go to a networking event and sometimes shove my name down people, and say, yeah, hire me. But it's the art of it is really, really learning to build a rapport. Like Kim said as well, learning to tell a story. I think that's all really, really important. And great things about employers, they really like being able to create a relationship with yourself. So, being able to touch base with that person, even after you met with them at a networking event, every 3 months, every 6 months, it goes a long way. It keeps in the back of their mind. And if there's a job that comes up, they'll be able to remember you and they'll get in contact with you. And that's exactly what's happened with David that's mentioned today. And one of the few things during the GFC, I was also tutoring at the University of Melbourne. It was actually quite interesting. And a lot of my students at that time was struggling to get work. I was one of the few lucky ones, but a lot of my students weren't able to. So what we did was we created an association called Construction Students Association many years ago, called CSA. And that helped, create a platform for the students to network. And if you're still a student, or even if you're not a student, a recent alumni, reach out to the CSA team and get out there, get into the networking events. I think their one is coming up very soon, as I'm aware. They have a yearly major networking events with all the major players in our construction industry. And really go out there, have a drink, build a rapport, and really have a chat and really, get to know companies and whatnot as well. And one of the few things in my realm, I would give some advice is there's a lot of industry bodies that, just like Kim was saying too, you can really attend. There's the ARQS, RICS events, whether it be the PCA Property Council. And if you have a big interest in the rail and road and infrastructure industry, actually quite interesting, not many students go, which is, do get onto it, is, get onto the ARA, Australian Rail Association networking events. and also the Roads Australia events too. There's not a lot of students right now, but say as an investment, it sometimes can be quite expensive, $150 for a student, but say as an investment and get yourself a ticket, go to these events. You might be sitting next to a director of Langerock or John Holland's, and they'll be like, oh yeah, we need cadets and graduates, and why don't you forward me your CV and have a chat. So I think that's some of my advice.
Yeah, a couple of really good points there, and I don't have too much more to add. It was just I think, and I think as Kim touched on in her talk earlier as well, I mean, you spend more time with your work colleagues than you do with awake time than anyone else in your life. So to the networking point, it's not forced. It's a skill set that you can develop over time just by learning conversation and developing that trust in a relationship. It doesn't need to be sort of forcing your name or opportunities down someone's throat. It's just getting to know someone and just being an easygoing person that you're personable essentially. And I think to Leslie's point as well, giving yourself just like a bit of an edge or being across what's happening more broadly in the industry, I think really helps so that you can actually talk to something that's current. So whether it's a specialization like the rail, the rail group or something like that sort of goes, shows that you're interested in what the broader picture and what's happening, and I guess sort of just allows you to talk to a professional on a level where they can sort of feed the conversation as well, rather than just having that gap between sort of student and working professional.
Thank you all. We've been receiving our first student questions. One of them I think pertains most to Kim, but I think Leslie, David, maybe to you as well, given that you would have been very busy with your extracurricular activities during studies, I'm sure. How did you find the workload of studying and working at the same time? How did you manage to juggle those, given that admittedly, yes, we do run a fairly demanding degree, and there's lots of stories of overnighters, people sleeping, working through the nights to get their projects done. How do you manage to work on that? Work on top of on that?
I think it sounds really silly and straightforward, but a lot of it is about planning, making sure you plan things out. When you look at all the assignments and everything, you're always given the program beforehand. Make sure you program in time to check things or time to print things. And if you do that at the beginning and you don't aim to finish an hour before it's due, and you aim to finish maybe a day before it's due, you'll find that it will help you get some breathing space. And as you learn your working style better, you'll understand how much leeway you need to give yourself. I was very lucky. My employer was open to me having more or less time. So I was always working at least a day a week, which is not that much, but and I could move it around, or I could come in and do a half day if I didn't have much going on at uni at that time. So it wasn't super demanding, but I'm by nature an overly organized person. So I like to have my time pretty well organized, which is sort of which I think really helps. And it is a skill that will help you when you do go into the workforce after graduating, when you start working full time, because you can't plan your day with 24 hours. You have to plan your day ideally to finish at 6, so that the person that is working with you, and even the people that are overseeing you, they also want to leave. So we all, like, time management is something that we all sort of need to come to grips with a little bit. Yeah, that sort of answers that.
I totally agree with Kim. And actually it's quite interesting and quite funny. When I was at university and was working part-time, I thought I did better at my studies when I was actually really busy and partying. Actually, it was quite funny. The more I partied, the more better I did, but I don't know how that worked. But I think, and my advice, the seriousness of that point was, I think because if you do keep yourself busy, because I like to procrastinate, and but if you do keep yourself busy, you're more likelihood to plan. So if you do get an opportunity to work and study at the same time, and you are busy, it's really important to really plan your time and get ahead of your assignments, and you realize that the pressure will be off because you've got so much stuff going on in your life, isn't it? So I do agree.
Yeah, I probably sit more in Leslie's camp than Kim's. I think probably not typically historically a very organised person, but when I was sort of studying full time and doing 4 or 5 days a week working, I didn't have a choice. I had to be nothing but efficient. It was probably 7 days a week with little social life for sort of a year or year and a half. Sacrifice. I mean, that was sacrifice, I guess, but in the bigger picture, it pays off, and it's not, not a huge sacrifice, I wouldn't think, but just by, being busy, you've just got to be efficient with your time. I think that really has helped me now that I'm sort of, in the workforce, because you're just constantly getting bombarded with, unforeseeable things that land on you, and you've got to meet tight timelines. So it's not dissimilar to, overnighters trying to cram for an assignment sort of thing in the work life. But I think it's exactly what Kim and Leslie said.
Thank you. There's a second question we have received, and I think that's about the nature of how you best communicate with a potential employer and what kind of tone. And I think the question is around, or I'll just read out, someone who's made their cover letter really direct and professional and passionate, but kept the email that attaches, the cover letter and the resume and the folio in a sort of a lighter tone. And I guess in a way that might also come down to, and I'm just guessing here, in a way we do want to be professional, but at the same time we want to, as you said, it's important to stand out and to get your own individual passion across. So how do you make sure that you don't sound maybe entirely generic in your professionalism that you try to bring across? And this particular student says so far they haven't had a much response with that kind of approach of sort of a lighter tone in the initial email communication, but with a more professional CV. What are your thoughts? What's the kind of, and it might depend on the industry, of course, as well. What's the kind of right tone to strike?
Yep. Oh, so you go first, Kim.
Thanks. I think it's interesting that you sort of say that, because the email, I think, is really important. Even because your email needs to be interesting enough that they will then open the attachment. So personally, I wouldn't have a problem with the tone being a little bit lighter and maybe having some humor in it, but still professional enough. It just depends where you draw the line, I guess. But I think that is sort of a way to show your personality, and depending on what sort of firms you're applying to and maybe the size and things like that, it is changing, and communication is changing. We email a lot more than perhaps people used to. So take into account the person that you might be speaking to, maybe the age of the person that you might be speaking to, and adjust accordingly.
I think that's I totally agree with Kim as well. And my advice, I've definitely have seen a variety of letterheads, cover letters come through, applications as well. And I think it's really important that if you are going to go with a more humorous or more light tone, you really need to know who your audience is. And I think I suggest that do some stalking on LinkedIn, go to some networking events, and really understand who that person that's going to be receiving that cover letter, and whether that person is receptive of that kind of humor. I think some obviously industry players, and there is a lot in construction that would be receptive, but on the other hand, there's some professional firms in construction that will take that as a bit of maybe crossing the line. So I think you really need to research on who you talk to, and once you go into the industry as well, and you're targeting particular clients and whatnot, you also have to go through the same rigor R&D, and that's my advice.
Yeah, Kim and Leslie hit it on the head. It's solely dependent on who is on the receiving end of the email. If you haven't spoken to someone before, I'd be avoiding doing an overly humorous or out there response. If you've had a couple of conversations and get their sense of humor, or you get a sense that they can have fun, absolutely give it a try. I think to add to that as well, probably more around resumes as well, CVs. I really like seeing interests, hobbies, like some point of difference, or some subjects, breadth subjects you did at uni that aren't just the generic ones that we'd expect to see. I'll use Jimmy again that we hired this year. He'd done film studies, he plays piano. I love music, so straight away I was like, oh, that's cool. And that was the first question I asked him in the interview, because we want to know that you've got interests outside of just sitting there doing your study, doing the course and getting into the sector. We've all got interests and hobbies. I think if you can bring a lighthearted element in that way of doing it, or something that's just interesting without having to dramatically change your tone if you're still in a formal process. But as Leslie and Kim said, you've got to read the situation.
Thank you, David. We have one more question here from one of the students saying that this is their first year of studying the Master of Construction Management, but I think this is a question that probably pertains to all degrees. So you're new, you've just started in your degree, and now you want to get some experience in the industry, but to get a foot in the door, you need to have experience on your CV in the first place. But you've just started out your studies. So how do you make that first step into the industry when everybody asks you for experience already? What's your take on that?
Since this is a construction one, maybe I'll kick it off and start it off. I think that's a very good question. And I often get asked that question from new grads or even students when we go to some of these networking events. And I think it's obviously, depending on the situation, again, some employers, they want someone to start straight away with experiences. But I think there is still a large amount of employers out in the market who are willing to give youngsters with a little less experiences a go. So don't be turned off by the fact that just because maybe one bag egg or one company is looking for someone else with more experience, it doesn't mean they have an issue with you. It doesn't mean that. It just means that they might be looking for, at that point in time, looking for someone who could jump on a project very quickly. My advice for that is, like a lot of some of the students I used to teach as well and mentor, was, if you do want to have to go get a job without much of that experience, it's really all about your attitude, right? If you've got a great attitude, if you really want to go out there and show that you're willing to give it a go, you're social, construction is all about being social as well, being able to communicate, being able to think on your feet. If you can show that attitude and show your willingness to work hard and learn, that's a big tick in the box, right? Technical aspects, when you finish your degree, everyone will have it. But the most important part is being able to think on your feet and having the right attitude. And employers will buy that. Employers will employ you, not necessarily always because of your technical ability, but because of that attitude that you're able to come up with and willing to learn, because you might be a very quick learner, right? So I think if you can come up with that and demonstrate that, and you might ask the question, well, how do you demonstrate it through a cover letter? If you try to get a job, that's non-related, and we previously talked about this earlier today, not all work experiences will be gone useless. If you're working at Coles, if you're working at Woolies, or working at some sort of other fish and chips, for example. I hired a student that used to work in the retail sector, but being able to demonstrate that attitude and the EQ and the AQ, adaptability and all that, employers are willing to give you a go. So try to focus on that area.
I can add to that as well. And I think Kim made a really good point in her talk before around valuing your profession and what you do, and sort of steering away from working for free. But I guess to sort of counter that to a degree, but at a smaller scale. I left out of this, but I did volunteer. I didn't get paid for sort of a day a week for a few months with a family friend who was a property valuer back when I was doing commerce. It was just a good way to sort of just shadow him in a way, and it wasn't anything too pressing. I wouldn't absolutely agree with Kim, wouldn't recommend working for free and full time. I think that's exactly right what she said. But even if it's just something, like Leslie said, going out on site with his dad or something like that, just something that shows that you've taken some initiative to go and just as a starting point get some level of experience, whether it's a day or two or something. At least sort of shows that you understand something as a starting point. But yeah, it is a tricky one when they're asking for experience, but it's an entry job. So agreed that any experience is good experience.
Yeah, and I think just to sort of add to that as well, it's like if a firm is looking for a student, they will be looking for that specific role. That's sort of what Leslie was saying. Sometimes a firm will be looking for a position that requires experience, but there will be firms that are looking that don't require the experience. But then it comes down to other things. So it does come down to personality, but also it comes down to, you know, did your CV letter look nice? Did you pick a nice font? Is it easy to read? Were you able to write concisely? Things like that. So everything matters in that way. And that's something to remember for everything. But the presentation, especially if you're looking in architecture, the presentation matters. So even the letter, even the email, all of that matters. We're judging everything.
Oh yeah, please don't make spelling mistakes in cover letters. Read it through. Get your friend to read it through. It's not a good
Change
look.
if you're applying for multiple firms, make sure you've got the right firm name on there.
No, I think that's certainly advice that has not changed, and thankfully these days it's easier than ever to get a proper spell check or something like Grammarly and those sorts of things. Certainly, that's I guess the basics that certainly you'd expect applicants to get right when they hand you an application. And I'm mindful we've kept you a bit over time already. If it's all right, I might put to you one last question from one of our students. Once you do have your foot in the door in a company, any advice how you then continue that progression within that company?
Uh,
Go first, Kim.
So I guess from my experience, I think it's sort of, it touches on all the things that we've all been saying throughout the night. You want to be someone that people want to work with, and there is the element of that is working hard and being attentive and being a team player, but also just generally being personable and being a nice person. So, you know, you might be colleagues, but you're all just people. So just being nice to everybody is the first sort of step. But because, I mean, that is also something that you get asked in reviews, because you do have, generally firms will have reviews where you talk about the people that you've worked with and your experiences for that year. And the things do come up about the other people in your team. How are they to work with? So it is something that's important, but also just work really hard and be mindful of the people around you. So little things like, if before you ask a question, I mean, we all say there are no silly questions, always ask questions, but before you ask that question, maybe ask it to yourself first and think about it and see if the answer is in front of you. So just, you know, show initiative in things like that, and just be the person that you would want to work with. It sounds so silly, but it's just, you know, general things like that.
I think to close it off, it's actually a really good question. You know, I mean, if you do get the opportunity to get into a firm or a company and you're working there, and to progress through, for example, through a internship, through a cadetship, through graduate, to as a consultant role or whatnot. One of the few things, exactly like Kim says, I totally agree, is when I'm hiring youngsters or new grads, I really look into, I think a lot of firms also look into, is the values that person inherits. And those values of a person being nice, being a team player, being able to, you know, really care and look after each other's backs. That's really important, you know. If you're a selfish person and trying to look after your own back, that's not on, right? So, and that's really reflective of our industry. We're very collaborative, whether you're working in architecture, construction, property, or any other spectrum. There's a lot of collaboration. So being able to be nice, being able to sit there and have a conversation and really relay your message and care about each other, I think it's really important. And those are usually the people that go a long way. And one of the few things I think, if you're really ambitious, one of my advice is, you know, having that little bit more of a empathy, EQ as well. You know, being able to really go out there, not only do your technical work well, but being able to understand and ask your bosses, ask your fellow colleagues, hey, do you need assistance? Maybe I could help you with that, you know. And that usually leads on to being noticed, because you're the type of person who wants the benefit for everyone. You know, wants the benefit for the company and for your bosses, and that's good karma. You know, that karma comes back and pays you twice, 3 times, 4 times folds.
Yeah, I'd say just aligning yourself to, and it doesn't have to be your boss, just aligning yourself to someone that you look at and you say, you know, that's a good example or a good leader of someone that's, you know, a few years or many years ahead of me, but sort of saying, you know, that's the kind of person I want to be, and learning off them. And whether that's finding, you know, the right boss that can teach you everything you need to know, or it's someone else in the organization that you can use as a mentor. But I'm not going to use the term piggyback, but, you know, align yourself with them so that you can learn their good traits and how, you know, if they're successful themselves within the business, then you can get a feel for the kinds of things that you should be doing to progress, I think, once you land that sort of first job.
Thank you all, and very appreciative that you've been able to stay with us for a bit longer. I think we can probably draw it to a close now. So many thanks again to our wonderful speakers. There was just so much practical advice and insights in your presentations today and in your answers to our students' questions. And yeah, so we really appreciate you making the time to speak to us today. And I think it was beautiful to see that I think there were several key messages that came across quite clearly throughout all of your presentations, and particularly the point around technical skills being one thing and something that maybe is expected when you come out of university, but having the personal skills to be a good team player, how important that is. And that is something that we've heard in previous years, actually, from at these presentations as well. So that's certainly something really important for our students to keep in mind. Just, again, to all of our students, thanks again for joining us. Again, make sure to make the most of the online Employability Week resources that are available, that will remain online. So do make sure to make use of those. And just a quick plug, Leslie mentioned the importance of having a good mentor, and currently the faculty is running its industry mentoring program for this year, and mentee applications are open until Sunday. So have a look at the MSD website. I'll put a link in the follow-up email as well. If you haven't applied if you're a student and you haven't applied for the program yet or haven't heard about it, do have a look. It's a really good opportunity to connect with an industry professional and get their advice and build your professional network. So have a closer look at that. So thanks so much again for everyone for joining us tonight. It was wonderful, and enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thanks, Simon.
Thank you.
Thank you all.